I'm Sharon Flesher, Executive Director of IFAR. And on behalf of everyone at IFAR, I want to welcome you to another in our longstanding series of IFAR evenings. Only, of course, this evening is in the afternoon, so that we can accommodate our two wonderful speakers who are joining us from Europe. Alas, this is an important and very timely IFAR program. We all know the terrible situation in Ukraine since the Russian invasion has taken a tragic toll on civilian lives and daily living. People are suffering. There are millions of refugees, terrible hunger, anguish and pain for many of those who have remained. Atrocities abound. IFAR's emphasis today on cultural heritage is not meant in any way to minimize the humanitarian suffering, but we are an art organization with a 50-year history of focusing on the visual arts and cultural heritage. So it is natural that our emphasis today should be on that. We organized similar programs after the tragedies of 9/11, the looting crisis in Iraq in 2003, Hurricane Katrina, and the destructive activities of ISIS in Iraq and Syria in 2015. What's happening to the cultural heritage in Ukraine, whether deliberate targeting or incidental to war, people seem to disagree, is not only an outrage, but in direct contravention of the 1954 UNESCO Convention, better known as the Hague Convention, to which both Russia and Ukraine are signatories. Russia knows better. As you'll hear today, Ukraine is a country rich in cultural sites. There are 7 UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So far, none currently has been destroyed. This week, UNESCO published a list of 110 damaged cultural sites. We have a full program today, so I don't have much time to tell you about IFAR, a nonprofit educational and research organization dedicated to integrity in the visual arts. We're 50 years old, and in fact are celebrating, after a COVID interruption, our milestone 50th anniversary of working at the intersection of art scholarship, art law, and the public interest. We focus on issues of attribution, authenticity, theft, looting, and restitution, and other scholarly, legal, and ethical issues concerning works of art. I invite you all to check out our website, ifar.org, where you'll find out more about us and also see some of our educational resources, our art law and cultural property database, for example, our catalog raisonné database, and our provenance guide. And if you're so inclined, you'll also be able to subscribe to the IFAR Journal, the award-winning IFAR Journal, I should say, and even better for us, become a supporter. We can certainly use that support, and anyway, we do so much for the art world and public. On our website, relevant to today's program, we've also posted a list of some of the many organizations, including those participating right now on this program, that have launched initiatives to help with the Ukrainian cultural heritage crisis. My colleague is posting a link to that document in the chat section right now of this Zoom webinar. Please note that the chat function will only be open briefly now for this purpose. It will be disabled during the program and then will be reactivated near the end of the program. But the Q&A function of the Zoom will be open throughout the program. So you can write your questions at any time. However, we will not address any of the questions until after all of the talks. Now, let me move to our wonderful speakers, who have been chosen specifically to address this subject from different vantage points. They'll speak in the following order, which is slightly different from the alphabetical order they were listed in the announcement. And you should be able to see the speakers now on your screen briefly. In order, they will be Konstantin Akinsha, Valentyna Bochkovska, Bénédicte de Montlaur, Corey Wegner, and Quinn Dombrowski. They'll each speak for 10 to 15 minutes max, at which point we'll open the program to discussion and Q&A. All of our speakers have long and distinguished resumes, so you'll forgive me for abbreviating them. I will introduce our first speaker, Konstantin Akinsha, now, and we'll return to introduce the others in turn. Dr. Akinsha, who holds a PhD in art history, is a Ukrainian-born journalist, now an American citizen, whom many of you may know from his years as an award-winning contributor to Art News magazine, particularly for his outstanding reporting on art looting during World War II. During the current Ukrainian crisis, he's been writing articles for the Wall Street Journal and spearheading a newsletter called, quote, "Documenting the Destruction of Cultural Heritage in Ukraine." Today, Konstantin will be speaking to us, or is speaking to us from Vienna, will provide an overview of the cultural heritage sites in Ukraine, why we should care, and the damage done to them. So without any further delay, I proudly present my old friend, Konstantin Akinsha.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this forum. I want to start with my presentation. You know, the current situation is absolutely striking and absolutely shocking for every of us, because nobody could expect such a development. Even people who believe that war of Russia and Ukraine is imminent could not imagine such type of war. Sharon mentioned that one of my fields of expertise is the Second World War destruction and looting of cultural property. Now I'm living, feeling deja vu every day. We actually reliving the Second World War again, and we have no other comparisons. We are short on them. You know, when we are talking about Mariupol, we are remembering the siege of Leningrad. When we are talking about Kharkiv, we are remembering Stalingrad. And people in Ukraine, of course, are remembering German occupation, because it's the first war in Europe since the Second World War, when huge cities are bombed day and night. And of course, this parallel, in a sense, are unavoidable. You can see a few photographs of the city of Kharkov today and the city of Kharkiv during the days of the Nazi occupation. So, architectural monuments are destroyed every day. We are just composing the list, creating a mortuarium of the Ukrainian architecture. But let's return to the realities of this war. When the war started, I decided to run a kind of newsletter describing in many ways not only facts, but my own impressions on the development in the field. Unfortunately, sometimes coming with very easy prophecies. It's not necessary to be prophet to understand what could happen in many situations. You know, by now we have already not only the list of destroyed architectural monuments, but the list of museums which are no more. And one of the first cases which attracted international attention was the burning of a village museum in Ivankiv, which was connected with very important Ukrainian naive painter, Maria Primachenko. The museum was simply burned by Russian troops. Fortunately, because of heroic conduct of few local villagers, they succeeded to run into the burning building and to save some paintings. But by now, Ivankiv is a symbol of this destruction of Ukrainian culture. However, it's not only case. Of course, all of you read and know about the city of Mariupol, which is today, or actually every day, on the first page of the New York Times. And unfortunately, Mariupol museums are basically all destroyed. It started with this charming Art Nouveau villa, which housed the museum of Arkhip Kuinji. Kuinji was Russian landscape painter of Greek descent who was born in Mariupol. And the museum had a small but charming collection of his works and works of other 19th century artists. It's the main highlight of the museum collection, so-called Red Sunset over the Dnieper, which is the early version of the painting because the final version of the painting is in the collection of the Metropolitan Museum in New York. We don't know what did happen to this painting. There are rumors and basically not verified information that the last moment this painting was saved. But even if it was saved, it stayed in the besieged city of Mariupol. And what happened to it today, we don't know. Other paintings were not saved for sure. So museum lost 650 oil paintings, some hundreds of works on paper, and some hundreds of sculptures. You see on the screen a portrait of Arkhip Kuinji, which was painted by his pupil Kalmykov in 1909. This portrait burned together with other canvases during the Russian bombardment. Of course, I already mentioned that it's not only museums, but architectural monuments which are not in big cities, but in relatively little towns are becoming destroyed. And we are observing very strange tendency. So far, the main theater of operation of Russian troops is the east of the country. So what you see here is a villa of in the little town of Trastyanets, which is not very far from Kharkiv. And Trastyanets was a seat of Ukrainian branch of the princely Russian family of Golitsins. In the end of the 19th century, when Golitsins became poor, it was sold, the estate was sold to very rich German sugar baron Leopold Koenig, who is quite a historical figure. So on the estate, he constructed this opulent villa. And actually, those of you who were in the city of Bonn, probably in Germany, probably saw his gigantic villa in Bonn. This villa, as you can see, was simply burned by Russian troops. It was not any military necessity. It was no Ukrainian troops around, no Ukrainian troops in the house. In addition to this, they destroyed very unique early 19th century stables / theater constructed in the form of the fortress. However, these destructions are happening not only in the east, not around Kharkiv and Mariupol, but during the Russian attempt to storm Kyiv. In the eastern part of Ukraine, which closer to the border with Belarus, many architectural monuments and lit museums were erased too. This charming early 19th century building has an important history and very important for Ukrainians. In the end of the 19th century, it housed the Museum of Tarnovsky, who was a very important collector of Ukrainian antiques. Recently, it was transformed into a library, and we can see what is left of this building. Russian attacks are not sparing Jewish monuments and Jewish sites. Probably all of you read about Babin Yar and Russian bombardment of Kyiv TV tower, which some rockets aimed at Babin Yar, the most important memorial place of Jewish memory and Holocaust memory in Ukraine. But here you can see monument in other important place of memory, Drabitsky Yar near Kharkiv, where thousands of Jews were killed. This monument, for unknown reason, became a target of Russian attack too. The main concern now for us, it's a Russian attack on Kharkiv, because Kharkiv is bombarded every day. Kharkiv is a capital of constructivist architecture. From 1918 to 1934, it was the capital of the Soviet Ukraine. It was a kind of shop window of Ukrainian Bolshevism, and the center of the city is full of very important constructivist buildings. Before these buildings were spared from direct hits of Russian missiles, but now they are not, and I'm afraid that many of them will be destroyed. In front of you is a building of so-called railroad workers' palace of culture, which was constructed by important constructivist architect Dmitriev. It's well survived inside, beautiful interiors. However, some of these interiors are lost forever because the rocket aimed one of the wings of the building. What will happen with other masterpieces of constructivist architecture, we don't know. Of course, there is another scare, and now Ukrainian art historians are very nervous what will happen after the war, when it will finish. And already they're thinking how to prevent a reconstruction which will disregard damaged architectural monuments. So, but it's waiting for us in perspective. In the moment, Ukraine is under attack. Cultural monuments are ruined nearly every day. In the end of my short speech, I wanted to add one thing. I am absolutely shocked by behavior of Russian cultural elite, by behavior of museum directors in Russia. I'm talking about such museums as the Hermitage, as the Tretyakov Gallery, who did not find bravery to express even minimal concern about fate of Ukrainian cultural heritage in this particular moment. I'm very surprised that Russia is still a member of ICOM, and I am shocked by the fact that Russians are, in the moment, heading the Commission of UNESCO on Cultural Heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Konstantin. And before I go on, a couple of people wrote into us that they were having some difficulty understanding the titles of the monuments. So perhaps before this, we will post a recording of this. We will find a way of identifying, or we will just do it and have a list and put it on our website in some way. I haven't quite figured out yet how we will do that, but rest assured we heard your request, and so we will try to accommodate that. Now, as I go on to our second speaker, Valentyna, I should say Dr. Valentyna Bochkovska, just as Konstantin was Dr. Akinsha. I want to introduce it by saying, when organizing this program, it was extremely important to me that we include a speaker from the cultural community in Ukraine, who could actually speak from the ground, if you will, as to what is happening and what needs to happen in terms of the aid that's been provided, the conditions on the ground, which clearly have changed somewhat from the beginning to now, depending on what city someone is in. So I was delighted when our next speaker agreed to participate. Valentyna, who has a PhD in history and was a Fulbright scholar, is now the director of the Museum of Printing of Books and Printing of Ukraine, which is located in Kyiv, from where she is speaking to us today. As a scholar, she has been engaged in the research and study of ancient books and has curated more than 40 museum exhibitions. Dr. Bochkova will discuss not only what is happening at her museum, but in others in Ukraine as well, having spoken with her colleagues about this. So I very proudly turn the floor over to Valentyna Bochkovska.
I appreciate so much to organize, and thanks a lot for audience for the interest to this topic. And moment, I share my presentation. Moment. It's okay.
Yes.
Okay. And
yes.
I appreciate so much for the opportunity to talk about the saving cultural heritage in Ukraine, dealing with horrible Russia war in Ukraine. It's a very emotional moment for me because yes, I am in Kyiv now, and the war start for me in my home, in the capital of our country, and it was very shocked for us. Hope my brief introduction is not interrupted by alarm, because we have here every day, several times we have alarm, like in every part of Ukraine, and it's continue with a rocket and bombed our cities, and we never known where it's happened. But we live and walk, and we live and walk in wartime, and since 21st February, our life changed a lot. The war in Ukraine, in my country, has been going on since 2014, when the Russia illegally annexed Crimea and started a war in the eastern Ukraine. Now, it is a new level of this war, because it's a war against Ukrainian identity. And about this, say, Putin announcing that they would like to destroy Ukrainian nation and Ukrainian people as well. And the Ukrainian culture, history, language, tradition, and our values. And that is why this war is for us, for not only for our identity, but we fight for our liberty and independence, for our rights and for values, and for way which we choose. For the democracy. And when we talk about preserving and protection cultural heritage in Ukraine, we cannot forget about the obstacles and about the conditions in which we try to save our heritage. Then I would like to overview about a little bit about my museum. You see this picture, and on the right side you see the modern view of our museum. We situated in the printing house. This printing house was founded at the beginning of the 18th century. On the left side you see our logotype, but it's the picture which was printed in the Bible 1758, and this building changed a little bit with centuries. the museum is housed in a former building of the Kyiv Cave Monastery Press, and it's very interesting that this printing house worked constantly for over 300 years. The State Museum of Book and Printed of Ukraine, established in Kyiv in 1972, and this year we celebrate 50th anniversary of our museum. I mentioned that museum situated at the territory of Kyivo-Pечерska Lavra. It's an ancient cave monastery since 11th century. And this splendid architectural ensemble of the Upper Lavra included on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And yes, we are afraid about our collection, afraid and think about rocket attack and bombing, and then we think about looting, because during this war we know about what happened around Kyiv. I show these on these pictures another gravure where you see the how imagine printing house in at the beginning 19th century, then at the end of 19th century and 20th century changed a little bit, and during World War, the Kyivo-Pечерska Lavra was mined, and the explosion you see here, that the cathedral and our printing house diminished a little bit. Then this view of our modern view of our building now, where situated our museum. About our collection, the museum collection contains over 58,000 exhibits, manuscripts, old printed books, rare books, 19th century engraving, printing presses, then book plates, graphic works, and so on. And more than 3,000 exhibits in 5 halls chronicle the development of book writing, printing, and book publishing in Ukraine. We present in our halls first old printed books, Apostle Lviv, printed in Lviv 1574, Ostrog Bible. We have in our collection 2 copies, 1581, Ius Municipale Magdeburg, printed in Lviv 1581, and many others. Museum holds different collections, manuscript or printed books, printing equipment, and great graphic collection. Graphic collection is one of the largest and most significant, and makes up 26% of the entire museum collection. And we have in our collection many original works of our famous artists, Bazilevich, Hordійчук, Черишніков, Yakutovich, I'm sorry, Олександр Єфахненко, Кричевський, and the museum has received exceptional gifts from more than 250 generous collectors, and among them ancient printed gravure. About a situation now, when the war started, we work and think about the war, because we know information about the war, and that is why we did preventive measures. Our preventive measures were digitalization of collection, but now we continue to digital our valuable exhibits. Then creation the virtual collection, creation imaging catalog, electronic museum catalog, and we give free access to our museum online collection through our museum website. I show here our halls. We have 5 halls in our museum where we have permanent and temporary exhibitions. And here before the war and now. And it's before the war in another hall, before the war and now. And when the war started, we replaced and hidden our exhibits from permanent exhibitions and from temporary exhibitions. And you see here empty showcases. Then we think about evacuation. Look, since 2014, we have a plan about how we have to do when the war happened. And in this plan, we have the list of our exhibits for the first evacuation and then the second evacuation and the most valuable. And it's not easy because we have to choose from 58,000 of exhibits. We have to choose only 1% for evacuation. But now at the first day of when the war started, we start to remove exhibits in these boxes packet, and then we remove to the secret places. And then we work maybe 2 or 3 weeks with the rules and the way to how to transport our boxes with our exhibits to the Western Ukraine. And now it's happened, and I was there, and now our most valuable part of our collection in a safe place. But it is not normal for our museum workers. And look, it's one of our museum workers. He lived in museum for 45 days. It's our guide. You see here, he is with his dog. He lived in museum. Then some of our museum workers now volunteers or in army. And about another museum, what the situation with another museum. Konstantin Akinsha mentioned about the domained cultural sites in Ukraine, especially verified by UNESCO. And when you read this list, you see that now, as of 25th of April, we have UNESCO verified domained of 10 museums. And here I show some of these museums. And what we do now here in the maybe in the epicenter of war, we try to help each other, especially in our museum communicate, and we museum association, we communicate each other. We have many webinar, and we try to share information about how to save or how to help each other. And I would like to show this picture because I know that many newspaper magazines in many countries show this picture. It's a cock which survive after they destroyed the building, and it's like a symbol of our brave Ukrainian people never give up. It's a happened in Borodyanka, but now this cock is one of items, museum item in Museum of Revolution of Dignity. And now in Kyiv, many people return to Kyiv. We know that we wait for some attack from Russian army. We know that the aim of Russia is the capital of our country, but many people return to Kyiv and believe in our victory, and we try to protect our monuments as well. You see here our main monument, Shevchenko, before the in front of Kyiv University, and now protected by sandbag. And you see here the monument, but you cannot see monument. This is a monument Bogdan Khmelnytsky in front of Sofia Kyivska, and monument Lysenko in front of Kyiv Opera, monument Hrushevsky in front of university, and I show some pictures modern arts. Modern arts, we never stop. The art is never end. And Katerina Kasyanenko, who had the exhibition until the beginning of this war, now work in Chernivtsi and presented the new art work in Ivano-Frankivsk, and now I help her to continue her exhibition and present this exhibition in Lviv. And I end my introduction with this picture: slaves are not allowed to paradise. You see our soldiers are very, very intelligent, and we don't want war, but we have to stand now for our country, for our land, and for our dignity. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valentyna. And in case I mispronounced your name before, which I hope I didn't, it's Valentyna Bochkovska. Is that correct? Great. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, thank
you. Say
you.
that again?
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Good. So I want to thank you. And I'm sure that a few of us will have follow-up questions to your wonderful talk. And I may ask you to do the same thing, that there were a few slides towards the end with monuments that weren't identified. And I have a feeling it will be helpful if we actually have the precise name of that for our audience. So thank you. I want to move now to our next speaker, Bénédicte de Montlaur, who is president and CEO of the World Monuments Fund, an organization I'm sure most of you have heard of long before now, which is headquartered here in New York. Prior to joining the WMF, she had a distinguished career as a senior diplomat at the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and she also taught international relations and diplomacy at the École Normale Supérieure in France. I'd like to note as an aside, and this is just a more personal thing, that at the fund, she replaced the longtime director, Bonnie Burnham, who was one of my predecessors as executive director at IFAR. So our organizations have had a connection for a long time, actually, at different times, sharing interns and other things. Recently, the World Monuments Fund launched a major initiative in Ukraine called the Ukraine Heritage Response Fund, which I'm sure you will now be hearing about. So with no further delay, I very proudly present Bénédicte de Montlaur.
First of all, I really want to thank IFAR for organizing this very important conversation, extremely timely. I think the more we raise awareness about what's happening to cultural heritage in Ukraine, the better. So at World Monuments Fund, when the war started in February, we immediately wanted to react for several reasons. I think one of the first reasons is that WMF has been involved in the past at several heritage sites in Ukraine. We've conducted projects at ancient Chersonesos in the Crimean Peninsula, at Zovka Synagogue, north of Lviv, at the Great Choral Synagogue of Odessa, as well as a Pidirsty Castle. So we feel a special connection with Ukraine. But I would say even more importantly, what's really important here and why we wanted to react is thinking about what is at stake and what's happening now in Ukraine. As we've heard from Dr. Bochkovska, and sorry if I didn't pronounce well your name, but what is at stake here is really, it's a war about the identity of Ukraine and the narrative of this country. And as we all know, and as we've seen over and over during recent wars, like in Mali, in Syria, in Iraq, cultural heritage can be a target during conflict to affect people's morale, but also to destabilize and rewrite the narrative of this country. So with a war in Ukraine that is so much about the narrative of this country, its national identity, we think that it's extremely important to pay very close attention to what's happening with its cultural heritage. So at the heart of the mission of World Monuments Fund, for those of you who don't know us, is working with local communities to safeguard their cultural heritage. We have been doing that since the creation of World Monuments Fund in 1965 and reacting to crisis, I'd say natural disaster as well as man-made conflicts. So we were, like, our first project was reacting to floodings in Venice. But since then, we've done dozens of projects to react to crisis. And I have to say that more recently, reacting to war situation has become more and more prominent in our portfolio of projects. We have created in 2019 a crisis response program. And currently we are involved in Iraq, we are involved in Yemen, and in many other places affected by conflict. So on the title of your program at IFAR, one part of the title was what's being done, because everybody is talking about Ukraine, but I'm sure our audience will be very curious to know about what we are doing. So in these kind of situations, the first thing you do is advocacy. So in February and March, we issued statement calling the attention on the importance to respect the Hague Convention for the protection of cultural property in the event of armed conflict. I think it's also really important to do advocacy to raise awareness internationally about the richness of Ukrainian heritage. I love following these events, meeting people, because every day I'm learning more about the incredible diversity and richness of Ukrainian cultural heritage. And I'm so grateful for Konstantin and Valentyna for giving us those wonderful presentations, because I think not many people around the world had an idea about how rich this heritage is. So first thing is really advocacy, making everyone aware on the importance of protecting cultural heritage in times of conflict. As Sharon said at the beginning of this event, of course, the humanitarian needs are the utmost priority. But for the long term, it's really important to keep the connection between places and people, because this is what also will allow the reconstruction of the social fabric in the aftermath of the war. The second thing to do right at the beginning of a conflict is monitoring. And for this, we don't do it ourselves at World Monuments Fund, but we very much work with our partner. So I'm sure we'll hear about that from Corey Wegner after I finish speaking. But so there is an initiative sponsored by the Smithsonian and the Virginia Museum of Natural History called the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab. And they are monitoring. The University College in London is also monitoring, as well as UNESCO, thanks to its partnership with UNITAR. So we talk to those partners to know about the extent of the destruction and to verify information, because we all know that information spread very quickly on social media and newspapers, but it's crucial to verify this information before ramping up our advocacy efforts. A third thing we've been doing is coordinating with partners. I know it's a concern of many people that during these conflict situations, many people get involved and there are redundancies and duplication of efforts. And this is something like a war is by definition messy. So this is something that you cannot completely avoid, but our responsibility is really to talk as much as possible to all the partners involved in that field so that we try to really complement our respective efforts. And so we've talked since the beginning of the conflict to our international partners, of course, ICOMOS, ALIF, the Blue Shield, the Smithsonian, and many others. We also wanted to be as close as possible to the ground, because this is the way we work at World Monuments Fund. It's a very bottom-up approach. We never decide things from New York, but the needs should be really identified from the ground. So we've decided to recruit a Ukraine heritage response specialist. And I have to say that it was pretty incredible to interview heritage professionals living in Ukraine, because first, and this we already knew it, but it was confirmed, like you have incredible professionals in Ukraine, really well trained, but of course it was also very emotional to hear them talk about their attachment to the heritage of their country. So we've recruited Dr. Katarina Goncharova. She joined the team this week, and now she's able to coordinate with all the key partners in Ukraine. And there were some organizations that already existed that have been very active, and also the new organizations that have been created in the recent weeks in Ukraine. So we are working with HERI, which is a Heritage Emergency Response Initiative. We're working with we are in touch with the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation and State Archive Service of Ukraine. And with all of them, what we are doing is to try to assess their needs. So we are reaching out to them to see what are the most urgent needs. So as we just saw from the presentation of Dr. Bochkovska, there was a very important need in museums about packing collections and transferring them in safe spaces. For us at World Monuments Fund, and many organizations have been focusing on this and doing it really well. And I know like the Polish organizations and museums have been extremely involved and helpful in Ukraine. For us at World Monuments Fund, we focus on the built heritage. And so, and of course, it's much more difficult because you cannot pack monuments and sites and castles and churches. So you try to protect them as well as you can. One of the needs that we identified with the foundation to preserve Ukraine's sacred arts and ICOMOS Ukraine was to send some fire extinguishers to wooden churches. For those of you who are familiar with Ukrainian heritage, there is this rich patrimony of incredible churches throughout the country. And of course, because they are in wood, they are extremely vulnerable. Several of them were already lost. And so it's really important to send some adapted fire extinguishers that are not going to destroy them, because we know, like when you respond to fire, very often you use fire extinguishers that in fact create even more damage than the fire itself. So we identify the right fire extinguishers, in fact, in England, and we are sending more than 400 of them to wooden churches. And what we like also about this initiative is that hopefully they won't have to use it, but it's necessary to have it in any case to prepare for any emergency, even outside of a war. We are also exploring other needs. We are in touch with archives to see if there is a need of digitalization of historic Ukrainian document that will be essential also for rehabilitation after the conflict. In terms of geographic focus, we are looking very closely at the zones that are newly liberated, so Kyiv, Chernihiv, Sumy region, and of course, following what's happening in the places that are being attacked now or that are the most at risk. In terms of what's being done, fundraising is essential. As we all know, the problem is that international attention shifts very quickly. And so 9 months ago, we were all focused on Afghanistan. Now the whole world is looking at Ukraine. But once the conflict ends, this is when the real need will occur, because we will need to launch projects for rehabilitation. The Ukrainian organization will have to launch those projects, and those are extremely costly, but it will be much more difficult to raise funds at that time when there won't be as much media attention. So that's why, as Sharon mentioned, we created the Ukraine Heritage Response Fund to be able to build a strong financial basis for to respond to immediate needs. So like buying those fire extinguishers, maybe digitizing, doing other things that are necessary right now, but also to be able to react quickly when the war will stop, and to help our to work with our local partners to rehabilitate the heritage that will have been or has already been destroyed. So we are very grateful that the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation already gave us a grant of $500,000. And we are currently partnering with Christie's that is organizing a selling exhibition in London called Safeguarding the Irreplaceable, and part of the benefits will go to our fund to support the rehabilitation of cultural heritage. But once again, it's really important to give now to support future needs as well as immediate needs for heritage. And we are also, of course, already thinking about post-crisis recovery. Hopefully, the hostilities will stop as soon as possible. And so we are aware of, as was being said before, dozens of heritage sites that have been impacted. UNESCO just published that list, and our partners have also complementary information. And as an organization, we will work, of course, with the Ukrainian authorities in the post-conflict phase and collaborate with our partner within the Ukrainian framework. So culture is irreplaceable. Of course, humanitarian needs are the utmost priority, but during this war that is so much about history, about the narrative of this country, any damage to Ukraine heritage will be a damage for a loss for the entire humanity. So what we want everyone to do is to continue raising awareness about the importance of protecting and limiting the damage as much as possible now, and in the future rehabilitating Ukrainian cultural heritage. And we are extremely grateful to IFAR for organizing this event, because that participate in this advocacy effort. And of course, we are grateful to all our community and all of you for your support. Thank you.
And thank you, Bénédicte, for a really interesting talk about the range of activities that the World Monuments Fund is involved in. And I'm sure our audience, that was at 500 in terms of registration. I don't know what it will end up as by the end of the day. We'll be very interested to follow your initiative and your accomplishments. Now I'm going to move on to our next speaker, Corinne Wegner, but better known as Corey, who also, all our speakers do, has a distinguished and very varied bio, ranging from an associate curatorship at the Minneapolis Institute of Arts to a career in the U.S. Army, to a career as a U.S. Army Reserve officer, from which he retired as a major. And in 2006, she founded the U.S. Committee of the Blue Shield. Now, how many people have a range that goes like that? You're not going to come across that very often. She's here today to talk to us about the Smithsonian's Cultural Rescue Initiative, known by its acronym SCRI, pronounced SCRI, for which she serves as director, and which is playing a very active role in the Ukrainian cultural heritage crisis. It's a varied role and works together with another organization in Virginia that has already been mentioned here today. And I will leave it to Corey to explain further the Smithsonian's initiative and its collaborative work with other organizations. So Corey, you can take it from here.
Thanks very much, Sharon. I really appreciate the invitation today. And I've long respected IFAR's work and the kind of raising awareness that it does about cultural property protection issues and provenance research. Many people probably know the work of SCRI and the Smithsonian in cultural heritage response and rescue, kind of based on our initial projects that we've been doing for many years now. So in 2010, the Haiti Cultural Recovery Project was kind of the birthplace of SCRI, and working there over a couple of years to help with the recovery of earthquake damaged heritage there. You see a little bit of that. And then kind of an era of conflict really ensued not long after. And we saw a lot of intentional destruction of cultural heritage during armed conflicts from regional conflict that kind of grew into the movement of Daesh or ISIS and that intentional destruction. And we worked on a number of projects, including the Safeguarding the Heritage of Syria and Iraq projects. And here you see some of our colleagues with projects that they did to stabilize collections in Idlib province. That's an ongoing program that we're still working with colleagues there. The Mosul Museum Project Zero program, as Bénédicte mentioned, we have some good coordination and partnerships with the World Monuments Fund as well as the Louvre Museum. And this whole program was funded by ALIF for the recovery of the Mosul Museum after it's damaged by ISIS. And you can see some of our main part of that project was the documentation of the intentional damage in a very careful and forensic way so that it could be used for future accountability for those that intentionally damaged in contravention to the 1954 Hague Convention for the protection of cultural property in armed conflict. And we have some other sites that the Smithsonian is working on, like the recovery of the Nimrud archaeological site, which we're treating in the same way. They also may know us for our First Aid for Cultural Heritage and Crisis course that we've been doing for many years, of which some of our Ukrainian colleagues and others in the region are graduates. And we also do domestic training. And so these are the things that we hope that we can bring to the table to help our colleagues in Ukraine. As I mentioned, the work that we did to document the damage to cultural heritage in places like Iraq and Syria is really one of our long-term research projects. So being able to create a methodology, both on the ground when you're looking at the damage to sites, we saw the photos that Konstantin shared of before and after shots of sites. And those are really, really going to be useful in the future to show what a site looked like before and after. But the actual forensic documentation of those sites can be much more complex. And for example, within the Mosul Museum, our documentation process, we took more than 4,500 high-resolution digital images throughout the building using a really very specific process to make sure that all of the documentation is held in a way that can be accepted by a court of law later on. We have a chain of custody of that data, et cetera. And then also looking from space and how we looked at the different cultural sites and created cultural heritage site inventories, and then used a methodology to look at sites both before and after from space and be able to come to some conclusions about how that damage may have been caused. And so we created that process in the 20-teens. And then last year, we were very fortunate to embark on a partnership with the Virginia Museum of Natural History, creating the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab Partnership. And as you see here, this is an image of Ukraine's map. And this is kind of a visualization of the more than 26,000 cultural heritage sites that we were able to create for cultural heritage site inventory using a methodology. It's kind of too complicated to explain in a 10-minute talk, but we use open source information and do a data scrape to find cultural heritage sites that we've identified, and then we create this map. And we're able to look at those sites on a regular basis as satellites go overhead. And we're looking at satellite information and remote sensing of thermal sensing. We're looking at visual satellite information when we can get it, which is sometimes hard to get if it's cloudy, etc. And then we see what seems to be likely hits on those cultural heritage sites. And then we go to our site list, and then we try to verify everything that we know about the site, and we look at various places. And this is all to say that that partnership includes colleagues from Ukraine. We're working with a number of organizations that have already been mentioned, but they are kind of key players along the way. So we're coordinating closely with the Cultural Heritage Coordinating Committee at the Department of State. That's an interagency group that includes 12 US government agencies that deal with international cultural heritage protection and the treaties that the US government is a member of. Of course, we mentioned working with World Monuments Fund, coordinating with ALIF, with the International Council of Museums, ICOMOS, International Council on Monuments and Sites, and of course, Blue Shield International and the US Committee of the Blue Shield. And then we have our international groups that are involved anytime cultural heritage is threatened, whether it's naturally caused or human-caused disasters. And that includes UNESCO. And of course, UNESCO works closely with UNITAR on satellite imagery in conflicts and disasters. And so we've been coordinating closely with them. We've also been meeting with UCL. But it bears mentioning that though we're all doing satellite monitoring, it's not as though it's a duplication of effort, because we're each using really unique methodologies to look at sites and different ways of gathering our information about what's happening on the ground. But this is a good thing, because in research, you want your research to be something that can be duplicated and something that can be confirmed by independent sources. So we see this all as a very good thing, and sharing information and coordination is really important. And of course, we're also coordinating in part through UNESCO, but also in part directly with the Ukrainian Ministry of Culture and the National Academy of Science, because we mustn't forget the scientific collections that are being damaged and at risk in Ukraine as well. Bénédicte mentioned the Heritage Emergency Response Initiative, and that's our close contact there is Ihor Poshovailo, who's the director of the Maidan Museum, or as mentioned, it's also called the Museum of the Revolution of Dignity, where the cabinet you saw has been salvaged and placed in the museum, which I was really happy to see that image, that photo. I've known Ihor for many, many years because he was a participant in our First Aid for Cultural Heritage and Crisis course many years ago, and we've stayed in touch ever since. And he often has come to this. He was also a Fulbright Fellow at the Smithsonian, and so he often comes to teach for us or to present his research at conferences. Our newest partner, which I'm really excited to be able to say, I think publicly for the first time here, is the SUCHO Foundation, based in Washington, D.C., New York, and Warsaw. And so we'll be working closely with them to support Ukrainian heritage via the channels in Poland. And we're also partnering with the Prince Claus Fund Cultural Emergency Response, who was one of our partners on the First Aid for Cultural Heritage and Crisis trainings. But we've also partnered with them in many cases on providing immediate cultural first aid for heritage sites in conflicts and after natural disasters. And so we're working together to help fund HARI, as well as a number of other small projects. And my team at the Smithsonian, not just the rescue initiative, but also some of the conservation labs at Smithsonian, have banded together to provide some online Zoom training for some of our colleagues, asking really specific questions about how to stabilize and store long-term some of the collections that they have already evacuated and collections that they may need to evacuate. And we're very lucky to have the HARI group on the ground, because when we do receive information about cultural sites at risk, we're able to kind of relay that information. And he's been to check on and provide resources for a few of the sites that we've pointed up to him. So that's kind of a little bit about the various partnerships. And I just wanted to mention, which I think is so important to do, when you do receive help for this, we're able to do some of this work because of the generosity of the Bank of America, our lead corporate sponsor for SCRI. And we have a number of other interested donors who are there waiting in the wings to see what they might be able to help us with as well. So just a little bit more about the Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab. As I mentioned, we use satellite information and remote sensing to be able to look at all these sites on a regular basis. And then we have a sort of reporting structure. I wanted to mention, it's interesting for those who might be thinking about, who are in grad school or whatever, in thinking about careers. This Cultural Heritage Monitoring Lab has every type of expertise, from archaeologists, art historians, geographic information systems experts and geographers, and all types of other cultural heritage practitioners. It's really quite remarkable how many different skill sets we need. And of course, we always need colleagues who speak Ukrainian and Russian so that we can look at some of the information that we're getting in. And then I wanted to mention some of the reporting we've been doing. These instant reports that we do, rapid reports, are not generally available online, but we have provided them to stakeholders. You saw Konstantin mention the destruction of the Kyiv Museum of History earlier with the important paintings by Mariana Primoshenko. This was our monitoring report we did on 28 February. Very early, pretty early in the conflict. But what I really want to mention with this is that we were able to react quickly to this because we haven't just been monitoring since the conflict of 2022. We've been monitoring since April of 2021 and looking at the sites in Eastern Ukraine and Crimea that showed signs of Russification of Ukrainian sites, as well as the rapid buildup of Russian monuments in areas that had traditionally had more Ukrainian monuments, and the study and research of that phenomena and what it might foretell about future conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And we had one of our colleagues from the Virginia Museum of Natural History had just published a paper on that, and saying that it did not bode well when Russia decided to renew the conflict with Ukraine by invading. So just to say that this is all part of a longer term research project. And then I'll wrap up by just showing the impact summary that we developed on 6 April. And those who are paying attention might notice that we have a little bit different number of heritage impacts as a total than UNESCO. But again, that's all to the good, because then we can compare our data and try to figure out the most accurate reporting we can. So I'll go ahead and stop there. Thank you.
And thank you, Corey. I want to proceed now, and I haven't yet introduced Quinn, our last speaker, Quinn Dombrowski. I think for a moment there you saw her slide, but certainly Quinn is last and not least. She is one of the co-founders of an amazing, to me at least, new initiative known by the acronym SUCHO, S-U-C-H-O, which stands for Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online. Unlike the rest of us, her background is in technology, and she is an academic technology specialist at Stanford. And she and a couple of colleagues in the technology sphere came up with, I thought, a wonderful initiative to document and preserve some of the digital material that may be affected by the fighting in Ukraine. But I'm going to let her tell you about this initiative. So Quinn, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you for having me. I know we're a little short on time, so I'll try to keep this brief, but it's really an interesting project and set of work here. Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online, or SUCHO, happened fairly shortly after the beginning of the war. The first weekend, Anna Kias, who's a music librarian at Tufts, posted on Twitter about a virtual data rescue session that she was planning for the following week. And immediately, Sebastian Majstorovic from the Austrian Center for Digital Humanities and Cultural Heritage jumped in with some ideas about tools that could be used. But I saw this and was concerned that waiting until the following weekend might be too late. We didn't know how the war would evolve over the course of the week, and I thought it would be good to dive in earlier and do more beyond just music collections. So the three of us and some other colleagues met on Monday, and by Tuesday, March 1st, we launched SUCHO. Sebastian had invested in a domain name. He had bought some servers with the goal of archiving Ukrainian, library archives and museum websites, understanding that cultural heritage is really at the heart of this war. Statements from the Kremlin have indicated that this is a referendum on, who gets to have a country, who gets to have a language, who gets to have a culture. And we worried not only about the destruction of the servers potentially of these institutions, but also that they may be hacked, that the narrative of Ukrainian cultural heritage might be subverted by Russian actors. And we wanted to make sure that there would be safe copies of those sites that we can then sort of give back to the people who maintain them. And in the first 24 hours, we had over 400 volunteers from around the world who wanted to help. We were building this website as we were writing tutorials, as we were setting up a Slack instance that we use to communicate. Not everyone comes from a technical background, and most people don't have Ukrainian language skills, but collectively, we've taught people how to use some of these technical systems for archiving websites. And I think one of the lessons that we've learned from SUCHO is that in a crisis, you need a mix of, both people, just individuals acting as volunteers, and institutions. SUCHO is not officially part of any institution or organization, although many of us work for libraries or universities. We're acting in our own capacity, and that makes it possible for us to do more faster. Institutions take more time to ramp up, but they're also sort of more stable over the long term. And we're getting to this point of intersection where we're able to sort of do more work with institutions that have scaled up to being able to provide access to the kinds of things that we need in the longer term for storing all the data that we have. One of our volunteers, Dina Strong, is referred to this as digital Dunkirk, that we will archive websites on any device that can do so. So we have this army of people's laptops, people's old laptops, people's old computers, even a Raspberry Pi device, that doesn't even have a screen, to be able to capture these websites, as many websites as we can, all the time around the clock. And there was also a new development in one of the tools that we use called BrowserTrix Cloud, that allowed people to archive a website just by filling out a web form. And it was so easy that literally another volunteer 6-year-old and my 8-year-old have been able to archive websites. We've been able to put web archiving in the hands of retirees as well. And we're also working with the Internet Archive to submit links to their Wayback Machine infrastructure, with the goal of having, ideally multiple copies of these sites, both our own archives and a version of them stored in the Internet Archive, which announced today that they're now archiving every website in the Ukrainian web domain space, everything that ends in UA, which is really exciting news. So a quick view of some of the sites we've captured. This is from the National Museum of Ukrainian Folk and Decorative Art. This is one of my very favorites. It's a two-faced lion that it looks so extremely happy. We managed to get all the collections on this site that were published publicly available, all the images, all the subpages. We've also captured a children's railroad museum that has these beautiful 3D tours that lets you walk through the space in happier times. It's a program where teenagers can learn how to be train operators, and there's a great museum involved. There's multiple of these throughout Ukraine. We've captured after-school programs for children, with the idea that these are places where cultural heritage is a living thing for people. This is where children sort of learn about what it means to be Ukrainian, national identity, language, culture, and things like that. Also things like music schools and dance schools. Again, like this is sort of a living form of cultural heritage in the regular lives of people. And very recently, to the point of art, we've moved into a sub-project as well, where we're looking at memes on the internet in multiple different places, in various social media channels, on websites. And this is another form of art and cultural heritage that's like very living, very responsive to people's situation in the war. It's a way of sharing the message about what it's like to be in Ukraine right now, and to bring some humor to a very dark situation. This is one of my favorites here. Operation Z and Operation Control Z to delete that warship. So this is what we're doing. We will be sticking with it. We're still taking volunteers for a number of our sub-projects. You can look at the volunteer forum on SUCHO.org, and to fund some of our ongoing infrastructure costs, we have an open collective where we can also accept donations. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Quinn. I hope you didn't feel you had to race through, but you got a lot in, and we have some time for questions. Can I invite all the speakers to come back now so we can see your faces? And we have a few questions. I want to take the host privilege of asking the first question, because it's really to Valentyna. And you showed some of what you're doing in the museum in terms of packing and getting rid. And of course, things are quieter right now in Kyiv than, which I'm sure I'm not pronouncing correctly, than they are in the other cities. But are you and your colleagues getting the assistance that you need, whether it's packing supplies, whether it's transportation, whether it's anything else? Because in the early days of the fighting, the report was that everyone was hiding in basements because clearly they were afraid of going out, and people were afraid to transport objects for fear that they'd be even bigger targets on the road. Are you now getting what you need, and not just your museum, but other museums as well, and others outside of Kyiv, since we have people here who may be able to facilitate some of this for you if you're not getting it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your care, and thank you so much for your care to our museum in this situation, and about our urgent needs. Look, when we package our exhibits, and when we select our exhibit to transfer to the Western Ukraine, we think about how we transfer when this route with bombing and that is why we think that we have to try to evacuate only the part of our collection, and it's only 1%, and 1% of all of our collection, all our exhibits. And yes, we need supplies, we need the packaged materials, because we hidden our exhibit in here in safe place but it looks like not very safety, and that is why we try to, for example, we work with museums from Poland. They support and help Ukrainian museum a lot, but logistic way from Polish museum only to Lviv. And then we think about the transport and think about how to take this as supply and so on. Then we think about the server, because our digitalization information, for example, our early printed books, copies digital in great large copies. We need a server because we think that have happened sometimes happened that we haven't connect with our server here or internet, and that is why we try to connect with some organization who took our information for saving. I know about the Internet Archive, and I work with Internet Archive some years and know very interesting work, and we can join with the to this organization, but I don't know how you can help us. Maybe we write some projects, but it's not like agent, but for research, for example, collection, because we have to think not only about now to save, but we have to live and continue our work, museum work as well. Yeah.
I'm going to open this now to some of the questions that came in. Thank you very much for that answer, Valentyna. And I want to say that this program was actually officially scheduled from 2 to 3:30. We, IFAR, are able to go a little bit longer. Two of our speakers actually have obligations after this, Corey Wagner and Bénédicte. And so they will have to leave very soon after the 3:30 mark. We can take a few questions after that, but not that much more, because I want to be fair to everyone. But I just wanted to give you that heads up in this. So I'm going to go through some of the questions, and forgive me if I don't get to yours. And if any of the speakers has a question for someone else, this is your moment also to jump in. So these are two quick questions, and anyone can answer if you want. My guess is it may be Konstantin or Valentyna, but probably Konstantin. One, has the National Museum of Ukraine been damaged, and where are the collections now?
I can answer. The National Art Museum of Ukraine, if the question is about National Art Museum of Ukraine, was not damaged. Where is the collections? I think that it's not correct question, because I think that museum directors in Ukraine prefer not to answer it.
Yes, okay, I understand that.
Because in the moment this information is restricted, but the museum is not damaged. And I can tell you more. Recently, we have the opening of the Venice Biennial, and the National Museum succeeded to send a couple of paintings which were exhibited in a pavilion organized by Pinchuk Foundation. So we were
excuse me, by whom?
Pinchuk, Victor Pinchuk Foundation.
Pinchuk. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, and we are very happy that this painting made all the way to Venice, which is very good.
Thank you. And another quick one here, and I had this a second ago. Is there any sense of how many cultural items are being looted and sent back to Russia, or are they just destroying them, or is there something in between?
You know, we had interesting cases of random looting. Like, for example, we have the so-called Popov estate, which is a 19th century Gothic revival estate. It was heavily damaged after the revolution, but after the Ukrainian independence, local authorities and local historians succeeded to create very nice museum, collecting pieces, some of which were looted after the revolution. And then recently Russian soldiers came, looted everything, but it was one very anecdotal element, because the estate had a marble toilet bowl, which was stolen after the revolution and then returned by repentant relatives of the person who stole it. So this toilet bowl was stolen again. So the history is repeating itself. It was just random looting. We did not saw cases yet of organized removal, which we had in Crimea after occupation of Crimea, when some museum collections just headed to Russian Federation, which is very important and difficult question, which needs a lot of research.
Thank you. It's interesting that it's a toilet bowl that was the target. I won't make any further comment.
It was an object of desire. It was made of marble.
Okay, fair enough. So now here's another one. Someone wrote in, I've been informed by the Center for Cultural Rescue in Lviv that the museums which have removed their collections for safety to basements and other storage facilities have a deep need of dehumidifiers to protect those collections and facilities which were not prepared for collections storage. Is that correct? And is that something that any one of these organizations present here, or perhaps as part of the several hundred people who register for this program, might be able to assist with?
Center in Lviv provided such information. I'm sure that they provided it for a reason. It's very easy to imagine that it's a very urgent need.
Mm-hmm. Is there anyone else who wants to respond to that question? Nope. Okay.
I'd say we've also been informed similarly, and we're—
Who's speaking?
This is Corey Wegner.
Okay. Sorry.
We've also been informed of that, and we only learned about the issue a few days ago, so we're trying to work with partners to see what we might be able to help with.
Great. This makes me very pleased, because I like to think we're doing some good in organizing a program like this that actually has some, in addition to educational value, some actual practical, some practical results. And this is a loaded question. From a legal perspective, what's needed to bring a 1954 Hague Convention violation to the criminal court or other international law tribunal? And my sense of that is fat chance that you'll succeed in doing anything, but nonetheless, I think it's an interesting question. Does anyone want to tackle that?
Yeah, I think that we have to occupy Moscow.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, you know, we have to occupy Moscow first, because
Yes.
before that, it will be not very realistic to take anybody.
Yes. Yeah. Has UNESCO, and this is another question, has UNESCO done anything to persuade Russia to fulfill its obligations as a signatory to the 54 Hague Convention? That's a more sensitive question, because I think there are a lot of people who feel it is wonderful as UNESCO is, that it's not necessarily enforcing what needs to be enforced.
Well, I'd like to throw in there, though, that UNESCO is only as good as its member states, which are actually who make the requests and make the rules. So I've been present at some of the meetings of the states parties to the second protocol, the 1954 Hague Convention. They have had emergency meetings, but Russia has a seat on the Security Council. That's the end of the story right there.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and thank you, Corey, for that, because I used to work at the United Nations, and I think everybody always loves to criticize the United Nations, but in fact, it's a very necessary organization. and then it's up to the board members to really make it stronger. And frankly, I'm sure that UNESCO is trying as much as they can, like the rest of international leaders,
Yes.
to convince Russia to stop this war and to respect its international obligation. But as we can see, it's not that easy.
And we can note they're also violating the Geneva Conventions as well.
Yes.
So, and I think for making the criminal case, our partners at Blue Shield are marking sites, because it all starts by documenting. And I think, as Cory said before, like gathering evidence is not easy, and to make the case, then to bring it to the Hague. So, and it starts by really proving that there were some targeted attacks on cultural heritage, and this needs a lot of documentation.
Thank you for that clarification. And I certainly didn't mean to belittle the United Nations, but it is kind of hard to get people to adhere to something when they clearly don't want to adhere to it, and when they have the power of Russia, which isn't adhering to almost anything, or it seems that way in any case. So someone wants to know about, and this was asked to someone in particular, but I'm going to ask it to anyone. Norman Foster has developed a concept for a plan to rebuild Kyiv. Does anyone have any comment about that?
I have a comment. I have a
Okay.
comment because now architectural community of Ukraine is absolutely scared. And it's not only Norman Foster, there are many developers and architects which already starting to share, as we say, a skin of the bear which is not killed yet. Because everybody wants to have a hand in this game. It's very dangerous. And now there is an initiative, I don't know how successful it could be, of Ukrainian architectural community to ask UNESCO to designate the modernist architecture of Kharkiv as and to put it on the heritage list, because people are really afraid of peaceful reconstruction, not less than they're afraid of the war destruction.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I want to go back to Quinn's comment about digital, if you will, replication of archives and other digital materials. Someone here in an observation, so not really a question, is just pointing out the necessity to back up materials. But of course, this is wartime, and there are a lot of things that one thinks of only after the fact. We need to be fair here. But Quinn, I wonder if you could say something about an aspect of your project that maybe people don't realize, namely that your intention is not for it to be permanent, but that this is intended to be ideally a temporary solution for something. Perhaps you can say this much better than I. So
yeah, I mean, this is an emergency response effort, kind of coordinated loosely by a bunch of people, with a goal of being able to provide some way of restoring at least some of the contents of websites that people have invested a great deal of time and effort into building. We know there is so much data out there that we can't access and back up for people just because it's not public on the internet. But at the same time, at least we're able to capture some things and the things that people have put out there for general public consumption. Our goal is to give this data back to the people who manage the cultural heritage sector in Ukraine, if they want to have a long-term archival copy in Western digital libraries. Like, absolutely, we have people lined up to do that. But the goal is to ensure that there is something, even if servers are destroyed or corrupted.
Thank you. I'm mindful of the timing and the need for a couple of our people to leave. So I want to wrap up now. If I've missed any questions, forgive me, I combined a couple. We will be responsive to that question about identifying monuments later on. And I wanted to just give a few logistics here. We recorded this program with the intention, if everything goes well, or, there are always glitches, that we will post it on our website after it's pruned for any glitches or whatever else. So bear with us. It won't be tomorrow, I can assure you. So stay tuned for that. Our website, as I mentioned earlier, is ifar.org, and we have a lot else on it. So that is our intention down the road. I want to thank our speakers very, very much, but I also want to end with a quote, and I think it's an important quote to keep in mind. It's one of two very famous quotes, actually, from Dwight D. Eisenhower on the eve of the D-Day invasion. Well, invasion is probably not the right word, on the D-Day in 1944, towards the end of World War II. And this is the quote: shortly we will be fighting our way across the continent of Europe in battles designed to preserve our civilization. Inevitably, in the path of our advance will be found historical monuments in cultural centers which symbolize to the world all that we are fighting to preserve. It is the responsibility of every commander to protect and respect these symbols wherever possible. The letter goes on. This was all to the commanders in chief who were about to go. They didn't know what. We know in history they won, but we don't know. He didn't know then that that was going to happen. And when you contrast that with the current situation, I think it says all that needs to be said in a way about what's happening here. And why we need to protect something and care about what's happening. Of course, he mentioned that there will be times that a human life, in the case of a soldier, is going to have to take precedence, but those are the exceptions, and we have to be mindful of this. Let's hope that's a lesson for the future. I want to thank all my speakers. You've been wonderful. Corey Wagner, let me say your full name, Corey Wagner, Konstantin Akinsha, Bénédicte de Montlaur, Valentyna Bochkovska, and Quinn Dombrowski. All of you, thank you so very much for participating in what I think was an important and informative program, and I hope even a practical one as well. Thank you. I will be in touch with all of you. Bravo.